Good evening and welcome everybody to another one of our Right Now programs. My name is Zachary Steele. I am the founder and executive director of Broadleaf Writers. We are always thrilled to put these programs on and to be able to offer them free to everybody. There are quite a number of them that we've done over the last year plus. They are all archived on our YouTube channel, just Broadleaf Writers Association. I think this will be the 26th one of them that we will add to it once this one is over. So if you're looking for any of our previous material, go check it out, or be active on our Facebook page or sign up for our newsletter, which you can do at broadleafwriters.com. And there are always links to the YouTube channel in both places. And I'm very happy to welcome Kerrie Flanagan to us, or with us tonight. Kerrie is not only an author and a writing consultant and a presenter, she's a freelance writer with over 20 years of experience in the publishing industry. Among her dozen or so titles, and Kerrie, you'll have to correct me on the number there, but she's the author of the Writer's Digest Guide to Magazine Article Writing and the creator of the Magazine Writing Blueprint. Her articles and essays have also appeared in Writer's Digest, Alaska Magazine, The Writer, Family Fun, and Six Chicken Soup for the Soul books. In addition, Kindred Spirit, she was the founder of the Northern Colorado Writers, sorry about that, and led the group for 10 years while organizing the annual writing conference and retreat. And so she definitely feels my pain and the organizational pain on putting conferences together. It is a big ordeal, and it's always worth it. So much that you can get out of it, but definitely I know what you've been through with that. So welcome. Very happy to have you here.
Well, I'm so happy to be here.
Excellent.
Fun.
Yeah, and now I was looking through emails because they're not nonstop, and I somehow managed to come across a communication where I guess maybe I may have forgotten that we might have even met once before at the Atlanta Writing Workshop a few years ago, because you were there, and we do volunteer work at the front at the registration and everything, and I was like, well, how about that? You reached out to me and said that you had this wonderful presentation. I'm very excited about it. And I am going to step out of the way and give you the floor. Just a reminder to everybody, as I put in the chat, you can ask questions for Kerrie as we go along. We do ask that you put them in the Q&A box, which is the center bottom of your screen. You'll just see a little Q&A thing. Just click it, put your question in there, and Kerrie will keep up with things as she's going along. But show is yours. Welcome.
Okay. Well, great. I'm so happy to be here. So I'm going to share my screen so we can dive right into this. So hopefully, well, hang on, let me move some things around. Okay. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that. It should say build your author platform. If you can't see that, let us know in the chat. But I'm going to dive right in here, and so excited that you are all spending your evening talking about building your platform. So let me go over a little bit first, an overview of what this session is going to look like. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about me. Zach did a great job with that introduction, but I'm going to even fill in the blanks a little bit more. We're going to talk about what it is, a platform. So if some of you are new, you may have heard this term being thrown around, but maybe you're not quite sure what it is. Or if you've been doing this for a while, you still may have questions on what a platform is. Then we're going to talk about ways to build your author platform. And I'm going to give you details about the different strategies that I'm going to talk about. Then I'm going to take questions at the end as well. Now, you're welcome to put questions in throughout, so I'm happy to answer those as we're going through, but we'll definitely have some time at the end for a big Q&A. Okay, so first, a little bit about me. As Zach said, one thing I do is I consult with writers. I've been doing that probably about 15 years now. So work one-on-one with writers to help them with self-publishing. I do developmental editing, magazine articles. So if somebody needs help through that process, I do that. So whatever I can do to help support writers, I love doing that. I have been a freelance writer for over 20 years. That's how I got started in writing, because it fit into my schedule at that time. I'm still married, but I had 3 young kids at home and I was teaching full time. So freelance writing and writing for magazines was a great way to uh, get in my writing and not have it consume consume the whole day. And then I am also an author. I am the author of the Writer's Digest Guide to Magazine Article Writing. And then you'll see the other pictures. I've also done poetry, gift books, children's books. And most recently, I've been working with my co-author, and we've been doing fiction, which has been a lot of fun. And we are managing 2 pen names. So we have romance under C.K. Wiles and then sci-fi fantasy under C.G. Harris. So I have lots of different experience in the publishing world, as well as running an organization for writers for 10 years. So let's dive into what is a platform. So it is what you stand on to get heard. So think of a stage, but unlike a stage in a theater, your author platform is not built of wood or concrete. Yours contains people. Well, not physically, you're not like standing on the people, but you get what I mean. It is about the contacts that you meet. It's also about the connections you make at writers' conferences when we can go to those in person. Those are great ways to meet your readers. And then followers on social media. So that's what your platform consists of. And Michael Hyatt, the author of Platform, Getting Noticed in a Noisy World, describes it as your platform is the means by which you connect with your existing and potential fans. So this is how you get heard. And the bigger your platform, I mean, if you think physically, the bigger your platform, the more people, the more readers you're going to reach. So that's why it's always brought up, and that's why it's always so important. It's so important. So when readers or writers think of platform, this is the first thing that most people, their reaction, because they think the only way to build a platform is through social media. And for some people, that's overwhelming. They don't want to do it. So they freak out, and then they don't do anything to build a platform, which is not wise. But what I want to talk about tonight is other ways to build platform besides social media. So you can rest assured, rest easy going, okay, this isn't going to be 45 minutes on how to build a Twitter following. Now, if you are on social media, that's great because it is a good way to connect with your readers if you enjoy it. If you hate it, it's going to come across. So that's not a good way to connect with potential readers if you're on there and you don't like being there. So let's say you've thought about social media and you're like, all right, I should try it. If you're going to do that, that's great. Just pick one. You don't have to be on all of them. You don't have to be tweeting and posting pictures on Pinterest and trying to do Snapchat and Twitter and LinkedIn and all of them. Pick one and then do it well. And overall, a couple things that I want you to keep in mind when it comes to platform. You really need to know your audience. And you can't tell me, or you might tell me, but it's not going to make your life easier. Your audience is not everyone. Your readers are not everyone. So you have to have an intentional audience. Like J.K. Rowling did not intend for all these adults to be reading her book. She wrote the Harry Potter series for middle grade children. That was her intended audience. Now, it just happened to expand to pretty much everyone, but that wasn't her intended audience originally. So I want you to think about it. If you haven't thought about that before, think about who your audience is. Is it women? And that's even too broad. So women, around the ages of 30 to 50, young women just coming out of college, like 20 to 28. So think about who your ideal reader is for your books. And if you're like me, you write in a variety of genres, well, just know that the ideal audience for each genre that you write in. And then also think about where those readers hang out. On Facebook, once that was originally for college age students, and then once us adults and older people started getting in there, we kind of pushed the youngsters out. So they have found other ways to connect with each other. So think about where they are. If you're writing young adult, Facebook is probably not the best place. Instagram might be a better choice. TikTok might be better, but think about where they are. And if you are writing for children, your audience, like who reads the book, will be children, but you're actually going to think about who's buying the book, and that's parents, grandparents, school teachers, librarians. So think about where they will be hanging out. Okay. So let's look at some different ways that you can build your author platform besides social media. And like I said, it's not because social media is bad. It's just typically the one that everybody thinks of. Newsletter, first one. Writing magazine articles, that near and dear to my heart, if you couldn't tell already. Teaching and speaking, and don't freak out, we'll dive into this a little more if you're already breaking out into a cold sweat at that thought. And then blogs and podcasts. So let's take a look at newsletter. Newsletters are an amazing way to reach your readers. It's permission marketing at its best. And what permission marketing is just like it says. You are giving, or your readers, your audience is giving you permission to email them by giving you their email. So you already have that open door, which is why it is such a wonderful way to build a platform. Now, I have to admit, I was one of those people that dug in my heels for years and years and didn't really put a ton of effort into building a newsletter. Yeah, I would do it like if I was speaking at a conference and I would get emails, but I didn't actively seek it out too much. And I wish I would have done it sooner. It's definitely worth it. And especially, it is absolutely worth it. And there are so many wonderful tools that have come into the market, I would say in the last year and a half, which has made it really easy, which is probably why I didn't do it years ago. There wasn't a lot available for us as writers to reach out to readers and get them on our newsletter list. But the reason it's so important is it keeps you in front of your audience, as long as you're consistent and not just sending it out maybe once a year. But if you have a newsletter, even if just doing once a month, it keeps you in front of your readers. So maybe they're going on a vacation and you write fiction and they're like, oh yeah, Zach has this book coming out. I'm going to pick up a copy of that to bring with me, because they know who you are, and it builds trust. And as readers, we like to read books from authors we trust, we like, and that we feel connected to. A newsletter allows you to share book and event information. So if you have a new release coming out, you can put it in your newsletter. If you are doing a book signing, you're speaking at a conference, you can let your newsletter list know all about that. And as I mentioned, there's some great resources out there right now. Newsletter Ninja is a wonderful book that will take you step by step through the process of how do you go about building your newsletter list. Story Origin has changed my life in terms of how to build my author list. So back in, I think it was August, so my co-author and I, we had about 50 people on our list for our sci-fi fantasy. And we really wanted to focus on building that, because 50 people, while I appreciated those 50, that's not a very big list. So we made a point to try to figure out how could we build this. And through Story Origin, you can do newsletter swaps with other authors of a similar genre. And what that means is we would find other sci-fi fantasy authors. And like, if you were to do this years ago, you would have had to reach out to them one by one. And you're like, okay, I'd love to highlight your book in my newsletter. And then can you highlight my book in your newsletter? And it's a way to expand your audience. But with Story Origin, it's one platform and they do all that organizing for us as authors. So I can go in and I can pick people that I want to do a swap with. And Story Origin tracks all of that, reminds me who those, it tracks who those people are. It reminds me when my next newsletter should be sent out. It is amazing. And I highly recommend it. And what happened, so we started that in August of 2020 and with 50 people, and now we're at about 3,000 readers. And those readers are all sci-fi fantasy readers, which is fantastic. It allows you to do, so that's individual, like where you're highlighting one book, but then you can also sign up for these group promotions where somebody will put together something that says, okay, here's a bunch of sci-fi books that are 99 cents and less. And you just apply to be part of it. And then all of those authors that are part of it are sharing it on their newsletter, and it helps build your list. And the way it does, you may be like, well, how does that get me an email, which is gold? That's what you want. Well, BookFunnel is another program, another platform where you can go in and you can create a free reader magnet in there, whether it's a whole book. So if maybe you have a series of 5 books, you can put the first one out for free for people who give you their email. You could do a sample chapter. You could do a short story that's maybe in the same world that you write. But what I love is that you send people there so they get something and something they're interested in exchange for their email. And they know up front that they are giving you their email to add to your newsletter list. So through Story Origin or through BookFunnel, it'll let them know that that's what's going to happen. So those are amazing ways to build a newsletter list. And I am definitely singing the Story Origins praises and BookFunnel as ways to help get that list going. So I definitely recommend it. So that's something you can get started on right away. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about is writing magazine articles. Yes, I do love writing articles, but it is an amazing way to build your platform. So why in the world would you want to write articles? Well, first of all, it's exposure. It gets you out there in the world of writing. And one thing I really like is don't underestimate the power in the bio. So at the bottom of every article I write, I get to put a bio, like who I am, and I can direct people to my website. I can tell them about my books. Like this earlier one in the upper right, it was when I was the director of Northern Colorado Writers, and this bio was in one of the writers markets. So it was, gosh, probably 10 years ago it was in there. But anyway, it gave me, I was able to share about the Northern Colorado Writers Group that I was the director of at the time, and do my website. The one on the bottom left from the Writer magazine is a current one. So it's a great way to connect with people, because if they have taken the time to read my whole article and get to this point, that means something I did resonated with them. Whether it was a short story, an essay, how-to article, something resonated with them. And I have had people reach out to me saying, I read your article in the Writer magazine, and thank you for sharing those tips and that information. And it allows me to connect with them. And then ultimately it gets me readers, which is what we want as authors. We want people to read our books or our poems or our short stories. Oh, there's the readers. So something to think about. So Writer's Digest magazine has 69,000 readers, subscribers. So not even, I mean, their readers could be more. 69,000. Now, and Writer's Digest is a very niche, obviously a niche magazine because it's going out to writers. It's not something like Better Homes and Gardens, which is more general interest. But if I want to reach writers, this is a perfect platform to do that. So if they have 69,000 subscribers, and even just a fraction of those, like 5% of the people read one of my articles and get to the very end and my name becomes familiar to them, that's huge. Let's go 10%. So 6,900 people read my article. That's great. I don't get that kind of traction on Facebook or Twitter. So this is definitely something to keep in mind as to why you should consider writing magazine articles. If you're writing nonfiction books, writing magazine articles is a great way to position you as an expert. So if you're writing, if you have a nonfiction book about making beer, well, there's magazines out there for beer makers. And I didn't say this earlier, but there are over 7,000 magazines in print in the United States. So this doesn't even count international markets, Canada and Australia and England. So 7,000 magazines. And a lot of those are trade magazines and niche magazines like the Writer magazine, Writer's Digest are focused to writers. There's the Beekeeper magazine focused on beekeepers. There are magazines for everything. So you can get as niche as you want and get in front of the people you need to get in front of. So I typically write about writing because that's my world. I do writing consulting. I love to write articles. I have my magazine book. So if I'm writing about writing, the people I want to reach out to are in magazines like Writer's Digest and The Writer. So by doing articles, I'm getting myself in front of them as an expert. Doing magazine articles gets you credibility with like agents. So if you want traditional publishing, this is a great thing to put in your bio that you have published articles in X, Y, and Z. It shows that you have gotten out there and you are writing. And this isn't a dig at anyone who's a blogger. I'm just saying that anyone can have a blog and put their articles out there. But with magazines and newspapers, it goes through a vetting process, and obviously not just anyone can publish in a magazine or newspaper. So it helps with that credibility part. It allows you to make connections. Think about the subjects you might want to write about. It connects you with editors in the magazine world. It connects you with experts in the field, which is one of my favorite things. Since I write about writing, a lot of times I'll think about articles or topics that I want to learn more about. So last year, I was really curious about the difference between screenwriting and playwriting. So I pitched the article to the Writer magazine. She said yes. So I got a chance to go and meet expert screenwriters and playwrights to find out what they do and learn more about those types of writing. So I love all the different people that I get to meet and the connections that I make through that. And I can reach out if I'm needing an expert in something, besides what what I know about, I can meet those people. And then I have these great connections that I can use in the future. It helps when you're writing magazine articles, it helps with search engine optimization, so SEO. So I Googled my name this morning, and obviously my pictures, my book comes up, but if you look down the bottom two, there's an article from the Writer magazine and an article from Writer's Digest. And my other articles, if I was to continue going through the pages of my search, other articles would show up. So if you're going traditionally published and you're seeking an agent, agents will be Googling your name. So if they like your query, they just want to get out there and make sure you're not doing anything strange on the internet, and they will Google your name. So if you had articles published, it's definitely a positive when they're out there searching for information. This is one of my favorite perks to writing magazine articles is, yes, you can get paid for them. And I always insist that writers get paid for articles. There are a few exceptions that you can write or you should write for free, but otherwise I'm all for you roll right out and you should be getting paid. You're not going to be getting thousands for your first article, but get paid something. It gives you writing experience. And then, so if this appeals to you and you want to learn more, obviously we don't have a lot of time to go into all the details on how to write for magazines. My book, The Writer's Digest Guide to Magazine Article Writing, is available on Amazon or in bookstores if you're out and about these days. And right now it's only $16 on Amazon. And then I have the Blueprint course, which is videos and assignments and different worksheets to go through the process as well. So those are some resources that can teach you how to write magazine articles. And then I'll talk to you more about this at the end, but I have an article I can email you on 5 things you need to know to write for magazines. And it goes into a little more depth than what I had time to do today. Okay, before I move on to the next one, are there any questions that are just burning at you for articles? If so, let me know. Okay, I'm going to keep going and I'm happy to answer them at the end too. So another thing you can be doing, which is what I'm doing now, is teaching and speaking. So first of all, why? Well, this goes back to those connections. You get to make connections with people. Now, even though I can't see all of you, I know you're out there and we have connected. And if you want to reach out to me via email after this and say hello and introduce yourselves, I'm totally open to that. So this is a great way to make connections. When we do get to do conferences in person, I love going and presenting at conferences and meeting other writers. And then for fiction, I also like, we've started, my co-author and I will go to Comic-Cons, and because that's where our readers are for sci-fi fantasy. And those are fun ways to make connections. So anyway, back to why. So you make connections, you build trust with your readers. Once again, positions you as an expert. Do you see the similarities here between all these platform building strategies? And if you are speaking and teaching, it can increase your sales at the event, in bookstores or online. So if you go and you talk somewhere, speak somewhere, or teach, it has that potential to increase those sales. Once again, I will send you, if you're interested, I have an article that was published in the Writer magazine on using speaking and teaching to find your readers. So where in the world would you want to be teaching and speaking? Obviously conferences. Now for me, that's writing conferences, but if you have a nonfiction book on a different subject, seek out those conferences where those readers will be, and then pitch to the conference coordinator, a workshop that you could do on something that you're comfortable talking about. Community colleges for teaching. I did that a couple years ago where I reached out and said, hey, are you interested in me teaching a class on magazine writing? And then I did another one on children's. So why not? Local libraries are always looking for classes and people to come in and share. And believe it or not, a lot of local libraries will pay presenters to do a workshop. They do have it in their budget. So reach out to your local library. Community events, wherever you are, there's events going on in your community. This is a fun one I've heard people doing. I haven't done it, but there are people who are very successful at setting up a book booth at their farmer's market, or festivals. There's art festivals. I know we have a big festival every year here in Fort Collins where I live, and I've had booths there before, and it's a lot of fun. Service organizations. So think Rotary, the Elks Club, just different organizations in your community that they are also looking for speakers. They typically have breakfasts once a month where they bring in people from the community to talk about a variety of things. So what would you be teaching or speaking about? Think about the content of your book. Like nonfiction is easy. Like for me, mine is on magazine writing, so that's easy if I'm going to be teaching or presenting a workshop. If you have a cookbook, then you could do a cooking class. If you have a parenting book, you can teach parenting classes. You get the idea. For fiction, you can still be presenting. So what are the topics in your book? What research did you have to do for your book, regardless, whether it's sci-fi or romance or contemporary or literary? Chances are you had to do some research, and that can make you probably have a lot of knowledge on some certain topics. You could pitch those to be talking about. And you could talk about what it's like being a writer. So like I said, local library, those are things that are interesting to people. So what can you do that would relate to your fiction? And if the idea of getting in front of people and speaking or teaching freaks you out, I understand. Believe it or not, I was incredibly shy growing up, but have worked through a lot of that. I became a teacher. But then when I was doing the writing and I became passionate about helping writers, it became easier to get in front of people because I was sharing and talking about things I really enjoyed. And you can start small, like even book clubs. Think about speaking to a book club. That's a small group. So it doesn't mean you have to be in this huge auditorium with thousands of people. If you are more comfortable in small groups, think of places you can go and connect with 10 people, like a book club, like Rotary and Elks and those type of things. They tend to be small groups. So don't throw it out the window completely if just because it means getting in front of some people. But think about it. Keep it in mind. Blogs and podcasts. I put them together because there are a lot of similarities with them. And let's look at starting your own, which can be a lot of work. But as with any of this, figure out who your target audience is. And you must understand or keep in mind that it takes a commitment if your goal is to build that platform. If you want to put up a blog every now and then just to write and practice writing, that's fine. But if your goal is to build your audience and build that platform, then you definitely want to build something that readers can count on. That's how you get the trust. That's how you get them committed to you. And to do that, you have to be consistent. And when I've talked to bloggers and podcasters, you finally get to see traction and start building a community. It's going to take a year or two where you finally are seeing that happen. So I just want you to understand, if that's something that appeals to you, just go into it with making a commitment. And it is a long game. It's not a short game where you just do something quickly and then move on to something else. Now, another way you can do this without having to do your own is to be a guest on someone else's blog or podcast. So if you are not a fan of talking and doing a podcast and and being on there and speaking, then look at blogging, because you are all writers, so you must like to write. And what you want to do is you want to research the relevant blogs or podcasts. Once again, think about who you're trying to reach. So if I want to be reaching writers, then I will be looking at writing podcasts where the people that are listening are writers who are trying to learn more about the craft and business of writing. If I'm doing fiction, there are lots of podcasts. There's romance podcasts, there's sci-fi, fantasy, there's podcasts for every genre. Think about where your reader is, where would they be hanging out? And then you want to pitch yourself. It's like a query, basically. You're going to pitch yourself to the podcast host or the blog host and why you believe you would be a good fit to be a guest, and tell them, maybe give them some ideas and some topics you could write about or speak about. So you definitely want to give them as much information as possible when you're pitching them so that they can make an informed decision. And you want to understand their audience. This is like any aspect of writing. Whether I'm pitching to an agent to get my book published, I'm pitching to a magazine editor, I need to understand the audience that I am trying to reach. So think about who that podcast and that blog, what audience they are trying to reach. And then have talking points ready. So this is podcast. For blog, obviously you get to write it so you can look that over and revise and edit. But if you're doing a podcast, think about the points you want to make. And if there's certain things, like if you have a brand new book coming out and you want to make sure you mention that, write all those things down so that you can weave that into the conversation in the podcast. And it's just the best way to be prepared. Because obviously, if you're doing a podcast, it's usually a Q&A with the podcast host. But there are ways for you to guide that conversation. Okay, some final tips. And I did notice there's some questions that popped up, so we'll do all those at the end. So final tips on building your platform. Always get email addresses. That is the way you're going to stay connected with these people that you have met in all these different avenues. So if you're doing an in-person event, so when I teach at conferences, I will send around a sign-up sheet and people can put their email, their name and email on there if they want to. So obviously I can't make anybody do that. And I want people to sign up for my newsletter lists who are interested. So a sign-up sheet, and then that gets you their emails. And I, like after an event or conference, I always send a brief thank you for, it was nice to meet you at the Broadleaf Writers Conference. And so I would send an email specifically to them, and then I would add them to my newsletter list. Links. So if you're doing something online, you're doing a blog or something, you want to get those email addresses through some different links, drive people to a newsletter sign up page. Just there's different ways you can do that. When it comes to your platform, you don't want to try to do everything, but think about what your strengths are. If you love talking to people and interacting with people, then maybe something like having a booth at a farmer's market is fantastic for you because you get to chat with everybody who walks by, and you would probably be very successful with selling your books there. If you are an extreme introvert and the idea of talking to complete strangers as they walk by, it just sends you into cold sweats, then that's probably not the best option for you. But maybe blogging is, or being a guest blogger, or writing magazine articles. So those are things you can do where you don't necessarily have to put yourself out there in person, but just think about all those strengths that you have, and think about where you're already connected in different groups that you're already a part of. But yeah, you got to use what you are, yes, your strengths. You may need to push yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit, but definitely go with your strengths, because by doing that, you're going to stick with it a little bit better and you're going to have more success. Keep it fun. You don't want this building your platform and connecting with readers to be miserable. So find ways you can keep it fun and connect with people. Okay, that was a little bit of information. So as we wrap this up here and go into Q&A time, as I mentioned, I have a bonus article, tips for finding success in the magazine world. I have the other one, get your book in front of a crowd, how authors can use speaking and teaching engagements to promote their books. If you would like to sign up for my newsletter, you can visit my website because I have a sign up sheet at the bottom of my first page, or email me and I'm happy to add you to that. And there's my email. So that was a lot of information and lots of broad topics there, but I'd love to have a discussion and answer your questions. So I'm going to stop sharing because Zach has the email in there. I'm going to stop sharing. And let me pull over your questions and feel free to add more. So Benjamin has asked, what is the best outside the box promo you've ever seen? Wow. I'm gonna have to think about that a little more. To me, the farmer's market is quite clever. And early on, this was probably 15 years ago, and it wasn't as common as it is today, but there was an author who was reaching out to book clubs. He had something and he convinced the publisher to put something in the back of his book. And then he would either go in person, and this was even before Zoom, which we are all familiar with now, and would visit with the book clubs via phone. So there's so many things. So Benjamin, I'll think a little bit more about outside of the box things. And if anybody else has any that they've seen people do that is really clever, put those in the chat. All right, so Chris has a couple questions. So Chris says, with the end of the Writer's Market by Writer's Digest, is there a good place to find a directory of magazines? That's a great question. Writer's Market, hang on, I'm going to grab mine. The Writer's Market would always put out their market guide every year. And there was a huge section in the back, like this much of it was magazines. There was a whole Writer's Digest filed. They ended up selling. Writer's Digest books ended up being sold to Penguin Random House, and the conference was being run by somebody else. So I'm not sure. The latest Writer's Market was the 2020, which still has great information, and I would recommend it. And I'm hoping they'll start putting them out again. But there wasn't one for 2021, but maybe by next year. Let's see, the Freedom with Writing. He has some amazing, he sends out a weekly newsletter with lots of market information. So I highly suggest signing up for that. Funds, F-U-N-D-S, Funds for Writers. That's from C. Hope Clark. She has lots of market information on hers. And if you go to my website, I have resources on there as well, on different places you can find magazine information. All right. So Chris also asked, can you touch on how or where to speak virtually? Once again, you want to figure out who your audience is. So like when I reached out to Zach for this, I was looking for conferences to speak at, came across Broadleaf, so reached out to him to see if he was needing speakers. And he said he was full for this year, but asked if I'd be willing to do this. And I said, sure. So think about who you're trying to reach and look at conferences, look at events. So just type in events for certain things and see what you can find virtually. Hope that answers your question, Chris. All right, John, do you have advice for author website? Wow, John, that's a big topic that we could spend a whole other hour on. Look at like when I was building my website, I went out and I looked at other websites. I'm all for looking at what other people have done rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. I use Wix, W-I-X, for my personal, my Kerrie Flanagan website and the C.G. Harris website. I find that it's a really easy program to use. The other help I got was with my local small business development center. They have free consultations with business people. So I'm not sure if you have something like that in your community, but look into that. But definitely check out other authors' websites. Figure out what you like, what you don't like, play around in there, click through. And once you start doing that, you'll see what works and what doesn't. That would be my best advice at this point. Mary Roberts, hi Mary, glad you could join us. So Mary says, I'm not published yet, so what are the 1 or 2 things that would be most effective right now for me to do? Setting up a blog, podcast seems a bit daunting while querying agents. Yes, it's definitely daunting. And so if you're querying, the thing with traditional publishing is it takes a while. I mean, they're not known for their speed. So if you're querying agents, to me, I would say focus your energy on that right now, finding the agents and getting that set. So once you get an agent, it's still going to take realistically a couple years before your book comes out. So in an ideal situation, you get the agent finds a publisher right away. You're still looking at a couple years. So you have that time while your book is with the publisher and it's going through the editing process to start building that platform. I guess in the meantime, check out Facebook groups that you can get connected with your potential readers, and you can just start interacting with them there. That would be one way to do it. If a blog sounds too daunting right now with everything else that you're doing, then yeah, just reach out to people in those kind of ways, or go to events that have to do with your topic. So Chris has another question. A good directory to get booked on a podcast. Oh, so I don't know if you saw that, Zach, but that's a great link to share. If you are interested in being on podcast, podcastguest.com is a great place to get connected to podcasts. Another question from Mary. How about a book signing at a dog adoption event for my dog book? Is that out of the box? Yes, that is out of the box, Mary. So hit a dog adoption event for your dog book. Yeah, that's a great event, or that's a great way to reach your readers, because yes, your book is about the dogs and those are dog people. So it's perfect. Yeah, when you start thinking about all the different ways you can connect, you can get very creative. Okay. I think I hit all the questions in the Q&A box, but we still have time for more, and I'm happy to answer any more. Hi, Tanya Ann. Nice to see you. I'm looking in the chat box. Okay, Chris already shared the podcast.com. Wow, no more questions? I've hit it all so thoroughly.
I'll jump in here with one.
Sure.
When you're dealing with, because you do a lot of consulting with writers, so when you're dealing with the overwhelming amount of information that you just very concisely put in there, where do you recommend they start? Where is a starting point for a writer that's just walking into this kind of world?
Okay, well, just walking in, like they have a book?
Like, let's say they have the book and their book is about to be published, and they're trying to figure out, where do I can do the social media stuff, but where do I start otherwise?
Right. If the book is out, then I would definitely start looking at that newsletter to start staying connected to those readers, and definitely doing that. I really wish I would have started that sooner, honestly. If I could go back, there's not much I look back and go, I wish I did that differently, but that would be one way for sure that I would have done. And just getting creative, like Mary said, oh, with her books about dogs, what if she did a book signing at a dog adoption? And I think getting together with other writers and who are around, who are, maybe having a book or two that are still early on, and you just sit there and you brainstorm, what are the different ways that we can connect with our readers? So I guess that would be, I don't know, did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's great. No, and I think newsletter is definitely a great place to start. Do you have a favorite company that you deal with? I know, like with Broadleaf, we use MailChimp, and I'm a big fan of MailChimp.
Okay, I started using MailerLite. I did use MailChimp, and as our subscriptions grew, they started adding other charges that I didn't want to pay. So
yeah,
MailerLite is pretty straightforward with, 0 to this many is, $15 and this to this. So it was, definitely straightforward, but I have nothing against MailChimp.
okay. And what kind of content would a writer want to have in there?
Yeah. For my writing one, I usually give an update on what I'm working on. I will put resources, writing resources. So I'll share articles, I'll share blogs, I'll share events that are coming up. And then I always put market information at the end. So I always want to give people who read my newsletter something worthwhile. And it's not just me talking about me. I want them to walk away inspired. I want them to walk away from that with some new information that can help them in their writing. With the fiction, you want to connect with your readers. Now, because the fiction I do is with a co-author, it's a little trickier to share what's going on. Like if it's just you, why not share what's going on in your, maybe some hobbies that you have, share some personal things. I mean, you don't have to get real personal. You don't want to put out whatever you're comfortable. But if you just went for a hike, we'll share some pictures of the hike. And people want to be able to relate to you in different ways. So put personal stuff. You can put stuff about your book, but don't do that every single time. And that's what I like about the newsletter swaps. A chance to promote somebody else's books to my readers and my newsletter list. And then I know that they're going to be sharing my book. But it shows my newsletter readers that it's not all about me, that I'm also sharing other information.
I see a couple more questions that dropped in the bottom there if you want to take those, and then see where we're at then.
Sure. How do I get the 2 articles you mentioned sent to my email address? Oh, Chris, just email me. If you email me, I'll send you those articles. Mel, is there a specific road to take for self-published authors than traditional in planning out our platform? I don't see it any different, Mel. You just it's the same thing. You want to connect to readers, whether you're traditionally published or self-published. I know that's not a very thorough answer, but really it's readers are readers, and you want to reach out to them in any way you can. Because I have my Writer's Digest book is traditionally published and my others are self-published. I would give the same advice to anybody, regardless. Ellen's question, can you share a resource on finding smaller presses? Ellen, do you mean smaller presses for publishing? Or that would be my guess.
I would think so.
Google is my friend. I just Google all those, small, I do like small presses who publish cookbooks, small presses who publish this. There's just so many different ways to do that. Poets and writers, but that's more literary magazines than, well, the writer at the back of Writers magazine, they will have presses. They don't, not everyone, but certain issues will have information.
I have one final question for you before we let you go back to your Mountain Standard Time life that you have there. And that is, so you've been doing this for 20-ish years, whatever it happens to be. And if you think about yourself on the writing journey when you were way back then, I'll have to move you into modern times, obviously, but if you could give yourself any kind of advice back then, like the you now giving yourself advice as a writer back then, what would it be?
Uh, Definitely keep going. This isn't to be a successful writer is not something that happens overnight. You've got to keep going. You got to push through those challenging times, and there are challenging times even now. There will always be challenging times, but you have to keep going and try not to do too much comparing yourself to other people. Like Stephen King, he put in his time. If you read his memoir, he didn't just come out and all of a sudden was this best-selling author. He put his time in. So you have to put the time in. You can't expect it to happen overnight. So you just got to keep going, keep moving forward. Don't give up and connect with other people. And I think that helps make us feel like we're not alone.
Kerrie, thank you. This has been awesome. And I look forward to having conversations with you in the future about programming and the conference and everything that we can bring you back for.
Great.
It's been great information. And thank you so much for doing this.
You are very
And yes, and thank you to everybody for being here. Thank you for everybody that was on Facebook Live. And again, this video will be edited and put up on our YouTube channel probably early next week. So you can look for that. Again, it's just the Broadleaf Writers Association YouTube channel. And I do highly recommend, if you're not familiar with what Broadleaf Writers does, go to broadleafwriters.com, check out our programming, look into the conference, the storytelling seminar that I'll be doing in August. We try to keep very busy. It's been my dream to do this and to do this for writers because it was something that was done for me. And I will not quit until I've helped people. So I'm very grateful to hear a kindred spirit say something very similar on the screen. So I don't feel so alone in that journey. But again, thank you very much and best to you and good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks for having me.